Hey, welcome back. Just wanted to give a quick story and an update on this. 1 year ago I did a video on the new Ryan ZTS stand-on aerator. We bought this machine and we started to run it, and we definitely had some complications. So before you make the purchase and you're comparing it to other aerators, you can look at my other video, the first review that I did. It talks about the great features of the Ryan aerator, the low maintenance features that it has, and some other things that are nice about the machine. However, today I'm going to go over a completely different aspect of the machine, it's unfortunate that it's been this way with the machine because we had high hopes. We're always trying to upgrade our fleets. We want to try to keep the best equipment running that we can. We are on board with anything that looks new and better. So of course we tried a couple machines in the past. We've had Z-plug machines that we use. We still use some of the Z-pluggers. We have some of the X-Mark machines. For instance, this is our stand-on X-Mark, one of our stand-on X-Mark machines. You'll see this machine is actually about 5-6 years old, and you can see it's in still pretty good shape for commercial use. We aerate a lot of yards, we aerate large complexes, and we keep really good maintenance on our machines. That being said, let me tell you a couple things with these aerators that we've learned since we've owned this machine. It's been almost exactly 1 year to date. We're coming into our second aeration season. First of all, if you decide to buy an aerator, a Ryan ZTS aerator. If you decide to buy a Ryan ZTS aerator, get used to seeing things like this. Now, given this machine, this is a letter from Ryan that talks about one of the several recalls that's been on this machine. Basically, this one just says, "Hey, Schiller Ground Care, blah blah blah. We're dedicated to make great equipment, blah blah blah." And then it tells you something like, "Hey, you know, we've detected that there's an internal transmission pressure problem. Pressure gets too high, creates a condition where the internal seal in the transmission can fail." So something like that basically tells you that your hydrostatic transmissions weren't designed properly with the machine, and you know, you have a major issue possibly ahead. So make sure you take care of any recalls. So a couple other things with this machine. To start with, I want to let you know that we had this machine in service. You can see we kept pretty good care of it. She's real clean still. But we had this machine for service no more than probably 2 weeks. We had our first issue with the machine. Actually, probably 2 hours I had my first issue with this machine. And I had to, unfortunately, figure out what was going on with it. So let me start with a couple of the things I've seen. The first thing that we came across on the machine was the chain tensioner. After I ran this machine for about 2 hours, this automatic chain tensioner, which is one of the reasons I bought this machine, because it's supposed to reduce your maintenance. But this chain tensioner wants to, it puts excessive tension on the chain. So we operated the machine and it started making a popping noise like the chain was binding up. I took off the top cover and also took off the side cover here, and as it did that, I could tell that the chain was very rigid. You know, there should be a little bit of flexibility in your chains. I could tell that the chain was very rigid. There was no flexibility. It was just too tight. So the chain tensioner does not really perform as well as I'd hoped. I'll go across a couple other things. That was in the first 2 hours of the machine, using the machine. A couple other things I've seen with the machine. From day one when we got it, the gas cap, when we fill the machine up, always leaks. There's always residue around here and wet gas dripping down the back of the tank. Never sealed properly. I think it's actually a tank mold, because we changed the gas cap and it did the same thing. We got a recall from Ryan. They had to change the auxiliary hydro pump. This controls your tines, your pressure into the ground and back out of the ground. So that was changed probably within about a month of having this machine. They changed the hose assemblies, the filter assembly. That was all part of the recall on this machine. I already mentioned to you the hydrostatic transmission. They had to change some components related to that, rerun some piping and stuff like that, so the hydros run at a lot lower pressure than what they originally did, keep the hydros from blowing out. Long story short, when we had this machine, we had it for 1 year. Of course, aeration season around here is only about 5 months. You have September, October, November, and then you have, say, March and April, maybe a pinch of May. So say 5.5 months. Out of that 5 months, this machine was only being able to be used probably about 6 weeks. The rest of the time, this machine was in the shop for warranty. So keep in mind, this part's really important. If you do buy one of these machines, buy it from a dealer that you can work with, a good dealer. Luckily, I chose a great place to buy my equipment. They really worked with me every time I brought this machine in for service. They were right on top of it. The parts, being a brand new first year model edition machine, were expensive, or were backlogged, meaning it would take 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks to get parts to fix this machine each time it was broken. However, the dealership that I went through was great with me. They gave me one of their rental machines as a loaner every time this machine was down. So I got to tell you, probably for the, I don't know, the 4 months, 5.5 months of aeration season that we did, I used their machine 3.5 months out of that time. So they were pretty good to me, because literally this machine was in the shop more than it was out of the shop. Unfortunately, you know, we do a lot of our own service, but when something's under warranty and, you know, the parts are new, we're going to let the dealership take care of that so we can be productive and keep working. Let me continue with a couple things that were done to this machine besides the warranty work. This machine, being a year old, has 162 hours on the machine right now. As you can see, it's still pretty clean. What I didn't like about the machine long term is a couple things like the pad on the back where your legs rest. You see they get dirty very easily and kind of stain. So you know, that gets in a condition where you don't really, you know, our X-Mark machine, like I said, it's much older, but you can see, look at the pads, look at that, it still looks pretty clean. And yes, we clean our machines, we keep them nice. However, this Ryan machine only has 160 hours on it, and you can see the pads. It's because your standing position right here. I see a couple of these machines that are rentals and stuff like that, it's way worse. These machines kind of get stained up and dirty right there. Obviously that's not a mechanical issue, but it's, you know, if you want your machine looking clean. I don't think the material is very tough either. I had a couple minor little things in here, like there's a tear in a crack or tear in this. It just doesn't seem like this pad fabric is very thick or sturdy. Now to a couple of the more major thing. Another little minor thing, we had mounted, unfortunately it was toward the end of our run with the machine, but up here we had an electric spreader mounted on the front of this machine that we only got to use for 2 days. We used it for 2 days and the machine broke on us again. However, in that 2 days, you know, we noticed when you put the spreader in here, this receiver is not sturdy enough to support the weight. So anytime that you do that, anytime that you put anything in that receiver, you have to solidify it. So we had to take this off, remove all the weights, add a weld, a bracket on the back of there, because even having, say, 20 or 30 pounds on the front of the machine, a lot of torque happens. And this would want to push down and vibrate down. All your weights are sort of up in here and under the front of the machine. So we had to take that apart and fix that. That's one of the other little minor things that I found. Some other stuff I found that's minor is For instance, on the X-Mark, these front tires are foam filled. On this Ryan machine, these tires seem to get chunks out of them pretty easy. And I'll tell you what, one of the times that we had got the rental machine from the dealership, I noticed that their machine probably had 3 or 4 plugs in each one of these front tires. And their machine, even though when we got the machine from their service department, their Ryan only had about 40 hours on it. So keep that in mind. Their Ryan had 40 hours on it. There was probably 3 or 4 plugs in the front wheel, in the front tires. There's probably a couple plugs in each of the back tires. So I don't think the tires are very sturdy or adequate either. As you notice, we've got sort of a bend in the rim. We try to be careful with our machines, but these rims are very soft. You hit a hard bump or you catch a curb or something like that, you're going to bend this. The rental machine was 10 times worse. It looked like somebody had taken a hammer and beat on it all the way around the wheel. So I don't think the rims are up to snuff on the machine either. I don't think that the engineering, the ideas and the premise of this machine were great. Being a first version, I figured there was going to be bugs to work out in the machine. You know, it's a first version. You expect there to be some little things that you have to deal with. In this situation, I just have to wonder if Ryan put this into any sort of testing before they released this machine. Because everything we did, there was a problem with it. In theory, the low maintenance machine is the reason we bought it. We inspected it really carefully. We did our homework on this to see what the features, and you know, some of the features like these Tine depth limiters are one of the reasons we bought it. The sealed bearings for the Tine thing, the automatic chain tensioners, those are some of the reasons we bought it. Now let's get to more of the major things. I would say a few weeks in to having our machine in service, we started to hear a little bit of a noise coming from the back. So let me get this plate off of here. So one thing you'll see is that there's supposed to be a guard here that covers the back of this chain, and there are little doors that flap open and closed. Unfortunately, they're both missing. One fell off. They just don't hold on there. They fell off probably within, I don't know, 20 to 30 hours of using the machine. They just fell off of there. Another thing, we started to hear noises on the machine is that, if we can find one anywhere, right here you can see, hopefully you can see, here's a tine. On the next one you see it's missing a tine. Well, the reason is these little brackets that your tine slides over and bolts to, well, the weld on those are not substantial. They're not built sturdy enough. So what happens is those things bend. It's the second one in right there. Those things bend, and when they bend, they allow your tines to lean like this or like that. Sometimes they'll bend so bad that the tines will rub on one of the brackets or one of the braces under the machine. The rental machine we got, that thing, I had it for about 4 days, and I had to work on it 6 times just to keep the machine running for 4 days. As I took the back of this off, I noticed their rental machine, and even though it had only had 40 hours on it, I noticed that this whole undercarriage, there was all kinds of problems. The tines were bent back and forth. Some of them, the brackets were completely broke off. Some of the tines were missing, and it all is due to those tine holders, or whatever you want to call them. They're just not built substantial enough. You know, on the X-Mark machine, we've ran that machine for 6 years. Not one time have I had an issue with the tine breaking off or bending. So, you know, you might consider that. Another thing is, if you look back there, you'll see those, it's tough to see, but right here on this bracket that goes up, there's pins right there. Those pins, they're difficult to get to. However, those pins connect the lift arms for your machine. When I got their rental machine, there was only 2 out of the 4 pins that were actually one original pin. The other ones were replaced with bolts. So I started watching my machine when we got it back from service. These pins will come loose frequently, and they control the mechanism that lifts the tines up out of the ground. So if those pins come loose, your tines do not come out of the ground. We had that issue on the rental machines. I was operating the machine and all of a sudden the tines would not come out of the ground. That's what it tends to be. There's 4 of these pins, and they're really tough to get to. So when that happens and you're on a job site, you better prepare to work on this thing for about an hour just to try to get it back on your trailer again, to get it fixed. But you want to keep an eye on these lift pins if you have one of these machines. Those pins right there. What I also noticed is the brackets themselves. So these are the brackets right here that lift the tine assembly up that go to the pins. Those brackets on the rental machines were bent like this. The lift arms themselves were, they're supposed to be straight. They were shaped in like a banana or a curve, because you know that when they got out of alignment, I think it tweaked it. So I started watching these issues on my machine also, and I noticed, luckily, since I saw that, I would keep a really close eye on it, and I would make sure that I would change these pins anytime that they popped out of there. I'd watch it really close. Pretty much on a daily basis, I would check these lift arms and the pins just to make sure they're not missing. They would pop out occasionally. I would say once a week at least we would lose one of them and have to replace it. If I didn't catch that ahead of time, probably catastrophic problems. Their machine, though it had, you know, a third of the hours on our machine, looked like it had been through a war. And I would say probably within another 20 or 30 hours it would be completely inoperable. Back there, where the bearings come through, the bearing shaft in the very back, where I'm shining my flashlight right now, at the very back, those were a recall. They had to redesign those clips on the end because that bearing shaft was coming off. Another major issue that we had with this machine is probably once I got to the point where we had about 40 or 50 hours on the machine. Take this side cover off. This has all been replaced because, let me show you this. This shaft right here, the sprocket slides on there, but the shaft right behind there snapped. I don't know if it's because of the chain tensioner. You can see all mine, the chain tensioner is bent. That's from them doing service on the machine and replacing this. But you'll find that this sprocket needed to be replaced. The chain needed to be replaced, because basically this shaft right here that holds the drive sprocket on, that controls the tines, and there's a chain that goes backwards here. You can see there's 2 chains on that sprocket. There's a chain that goes backwards to the back wheel. Well, this snapped. Well, when you can't run your back wheel because your drive sprocket broke off, and it's not just the sprocket, it's the actual shaft that goes through, the same shaft that comes through here, and you know, comes all the way through and drives your tines. So getting this machine on the trailer when that sprocket is broke off is a real pain in the butt. It's also major. When that broke, they had this machine for 6 weeks. It took about 3.5, 4 weeks to get the parts. Then it took them a couple weeks to fit it into the service schedule. Had it for about 6 weeks. You can see on the outside of this thing, this is the outside, and you can see right here where it's rubbing. This cover right here has been replaced 3 times. And you can see it rubs. We actually even put a washer where this mounts. I added this washer to give it a little extra space. Ever since they've upgraded, let's say upgraded and fixed this, the Ryan did a couple little minor upgrades, they called it, but ever since they upgraded it, this has rubbed the cover non-stop. We've never been able to keep the cover on there. This cover was replaced 3 times because it keeps rubbing. The chain rubs the cover and the sprocket rubs the cover. Long story short, we got this machine fixed, ran this thing in about another 20 hours. The sprocket shaft on the other side of the machine broke. Same spot, same location, broken. Another trouble trying to get this thing on the trailer. And so I would definitely watch out for that. Obviously that's a major problem. I don't think Ryan's addressed that at all. But I don't know what causes it to break. It could be the excessive chain tension. At one point, we adjusted this right here. That's the spring that tensions the adjuster, and we loosened that up so that we could get a little less tension out of this chain, because it, you know, as you run the machine, these things click and click and click and click, and they go. And the more that they click, the more tension that gets on the chain. But I think the tensioner is too excessive. So, you know, both sides of those drive sprockets broke on us. And something now seems to be out of alignment because it always continues to rub this. See, what other issues have we had with the machine? Those are probably the 2 most major. The tine pins and the lift and raise is bad on the machine. After they replaced this, we've had some hydraulic issues. Always kind of a drip onto the back of this thing. Hydraulic oil coming through here. At one point the machine wouldn't start. So we found out that basically the fuse, it was a pretty simple fix, but it took a little while to figure out why. The fuse holder for the ignition, basically one of the fuses just fell out. So when we found out there was a missing fuse, put it back in, it was fine. But no, it vibrated out. These little rubber things that go on the top of this just keeps your, get this stuff off a second. This right here just keeps your thing up, but these little rubber things right here are gone almost instantly. Probably, I bet within 10 hours those things come off of there. You'll see that when they come off of there, things start rubbing. So both of these came off. Sort of the final straw on this machine, after the tine assemblies broke, or after the tine problem, and after these axles on the sides broke, we honestly decided that it was time to find a different solution. That we probably could not go through another aeration season with the Ryan machine. It's not ready for service, in my opinion, for commercial duty service. When you have it in the shop probably 8 times in 1 year, obviously I don't think it was tested. We baby our machines, we maintain them to the highest standards, and it just, the machine operates beautifully, but you know, if you can't keep it running, then I think, you know, for us, we need to find another solution. We are definitely going to go back to another X-Mark machine. So I don't think this machine, I've worked out a deal with the dealership, and we're going to trade this machine back in, and we're going to get a brand new X-Mark machine instead, because this machine just isn't holding up, and we can't afford the downtime every say 20 hours, and we have to take this thing. Hopefully it's helped you out with this machine and kind of know what to look for. If you do have one of these machines, I'm sorry to hear it, but keep an eye out on those things so that you know what to look for, and maybe you can keep your machine running and have as little downtime as possible. You know, you can consider all the options on these machines. Watch my other video, you'll see all the positives that I found about these machines that you know might still convince you to buy one of these machines. But you know, when there's some major things like these sprockets that are breaking, and you know, basically they replaced it without any sort of upgrades. So you know, I had this issue on both sides of the machine with no upgrades. I assume that, you know, let me say another 40-50 hours, I would say there's about a 90% chance one of these sprockets are going to break off again, because there's no changes from the first time they built the machine. If it broke in 40 hours and the second one broke in 80 hours, I would assume, you know, there's going to be more troubles down the road with that, unfortunately. Between that and when I was running their rental machine on the 4th day that I had it, I don't know if it has to do with the same problem as was outlined in the letter, but the 4th day I had it, one of the hydros quit working and went out. We had to try to get it up on the trailer with one of the sides of the machines not working because the hydro pump had failed. So after I saw the hydro pump fail, and after these sprocket issues, and then I took a look at their rental machine, and the whole Tine carriage, you know, looked like it had been through some sort of war because everything was broken. We really decided that long term on this machine was not going to be a good scenario for us. I hate to tell you that. Unfortunately, features on the machine, I give this thing probably a 9. It rides like a Cadillac. It's a lot smoother than the X-Mark. When you're riding it, it does feel bigger, even though it's not really much bigger. You know, for me, I always compare this Ryan machine, the ride, as a Cadillac, where the X-Mark machine, it rides more like a sports car. So it's like a Corvette. It's zippy, it's fast, it's a little bit rougher, where the Ryan seems a little bigger, even though it's not bigger, but it feels bigger when you're operating it. It feels heavier. It's just a different ride. So maybe this is the one for you. For us, I can tell you 100%, it does a great job, but longevity-wise, it's not the machine for us. Hopefully that's helped, and good luck with your aerating season.